Hey everybody, welcome to a new edition of the Talking About Cars podcast, where it's all about everybody has a car story, a diversion to what's really going on around here. And like everybody else doing shows nowadays, we're doing it on Zoom. Speaking of a man with nothing to do, Bob Beck, Hot Rod Bob Beck is joining us, ladies and gentlemen. How you doing, Hot Rod Bob Beck?
How are you? Well, I'm doing good. The weather is great out here. It's a warm day. We're up into the upper 70s today.
Yeah, well, we, of course, are here in our San Fernando Valley studios. And by the way, I'm Randy Kerdoon. Welcome to the show. And we are joined by a great friend of the podcast, where I would say it's a little cooler where he is right now. Ladies and gentlemen, from your favorite show on YouTube, Cold War Motors, Scott Newstead is here. Scott, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Okay, now if you don't know where Scott lives, Scott does this show on YouTube, and he's in Canada. Scott, exactly whereabouts? You don't have to give me the address, but general sense.
We're just outside of Edmonton in Alberta, so kind of central Alberta. Yeah, about 350 miles north of the border.
Yeah. Scott, we did our interview, our first one, about a year and a half ago-ish, 2018, sort of. And I got to tell you, your two segments that we called out of that interview have remained in our top 8 every week since then. I want to say you have, how many followers now on your YouTube channel?
43,000 plus, something like that. Yeah.
And they're all doing it one after the other to listen to him on our show previous. It's like there's a continual roll of people coming in, which is really good. I like to see that. So, Scott, you have very loyal listeners and very loyal followers. Can you believe that when you started this 10 years ago, you'd have that many people following what you do?
Well, it was, when I started, it was a lot different thing, right? Like a big channel on YouTube was kind of 100,000. And I set my goal arbitrarily doing some grade 5 math at about 30,000. And at the time, when you've got 7 subscribers, 30,000 seems like a far ways off. And but I mean, 10 years I've been doing it, and I mean, there are channels bigger than mine that have been around for four months. So on one hand, I did end up with what I realistically thought that I would end up with, is a small group of people who really like it, and a very large group of people who can't stand it.
We need to come up with a concept of seeking out these cars the way you do.
Sorry, who came up with it?
How'd you come up with it? Why do that?
Well, I was doing it anyway, I guess, was the thing. The whole thing with the YouTube channel was that all I would have to do is start filming whatever I was doing anyway. Like the YouTube channel was really just filming what I do when I get up in the morning. So it's never been something that I set out with the intent of saying, well, this would make a good show, let's make a show. It was more like, what we're doing every day for fun is better than most of what I'm seeing on YouTube now. Not to denigrate any of it, but 10 years ago I was watching to see if there was anything that I was personally that it was like really speaking to me, and there was just a lot of stuff that just seemed a little remote to me, and I thought, well, I guess I'd better put my money where my mouth is. And I thought maybe there's a tiny bit of space on YouTube for something that's a little bit esoteric, and something that's more about having fun than it is about trying to be the most or the best or the biggest. And it's really it came from that, and I was hoarding cars anyway, and so and then it became clear after a while that if you have this many cars, it's much easier to move them around if they run. So then it became about, can we get these dead junk cars to run without spending any money because I'm poor? And then that turned out to actually be kind of an interesting challenge when you take all the money out of it and all you're left with is a bunch of broken junk and some basic tools. It turns out that after I did a few, you can actually get just about anything to run. And then that started the Will It Run series, which I don't think I will make anymore because every second video on YouTube is called Will It Run now, and people think I'm copying theirs. So I've kind of, excuse me, transitioned it a little bit more towards a little bit more about building complete drivable cars and transitioning it a bit away from getting junk to run, because I think I've got nothing to prove. But I think the next step for me was, especially when I realized that some of these cars, just to get them running, was taking a tremendous amount of hours. And I thought, for that number of hours, why not have it finish with the car getting plates instead of the car just moving around in the yard? So that's kind of been the overall evolution of the thing. And then with the latest Plymouth project, I thought, well, let's really, let's do something. I think just a lot of people have written what we do off as just a bunch of stoners goofing off. And I thought, you know, and I haven't really done much to discourage that, I admit. So I thought, well, let's do something a little more complex. And that's where that project came about, because I was doing that stuff anyway as well. And I just never really put any serious work on YouTube until the last few years.
So if I understand what you're saying, you went from stoners goofing off to stoners actually building a really cool car based on combining two cars. Is that kind of where we're at?
Three.
Three?
Yeah, two or more, yeah.
Oh, that's right. You had that, you had the four-door Plymouth. I forgot about that. You know,
yeah. Well, and again, it was not a stunt. It was just, that was something I was doing anyway. I was going to do it anyway. And I thought, well, I bet you nobody else is doing this right now. And I mean, I've seen a few of the how to do bodywork videos on YouTube, and they're really, you know, like stuffing fiberglass and Kleenex in the holes of your Honda Civic is not doing bodywork. But they had 3 million views on it.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, well, let's see if anybody can actually do bodywork. And, you know, I thought, well, here's one that would be difficult to dismiss as just a bunch of dummies goofing off.
Yeah,
I had a nice car at the end of it too. Like I really did. I did want that car. It's one of my favorite cars, and if I didn't have a YouTube channel, I'd be doing all the exact same work on that car that I am anyway.
and the interesting thing about that is he started off with a 1960 Plymouth Fury hardtop, and he needed, I guess the frame was all rotted out, and so you needed another frame, and where you got the frame to replace that, I think is just a crack up story.
Well, yeah, being 1960 was the first year of the unibody structures. There's not a frame per se. So when the bottom half of the Plymouth was beyond repair, you actually have to replace, you know, the rockers, the floor, the torque boxes, the frame rails, etc. And that's where the idea of the big unibody splice came in. And having an understanding and having done collision for 30 years, I decided that we could back this car up the assembly line to where the assembly line would have branched off, and the Plymouths go here and the Dodges go here. So we back up the structure to here, and we just take it down here and we put the top of the Plymouth on it. And since the top of the Plymouth was all that was savable, really there was no loss. I sold everything I didn't use off the Dodge, and it went to a good home, and managed to save the Plymouth using the Dodge Dart, which came out in 1960, as any Chrysler nerd would tell you, based on the Plymouth, shorter Plymouth wheelbase to give Dodge a low-priced car. And so understanding that the Dodge Dart that came out in 1960 was essentially a Plymouth Fury chassis, or structure rather. And then when you got into it, you could see that there were tabs welded to the structure of the Dodge that had nothing welded to them, but they were all installed at the factory before the cars branched off. And so it more or less went back in, like it was a little easier, you know, to understand how it was going to work when you see that all those brackets and stuff were there already to support the Plymouth structure. They just never had anything welded to them if it became a Dodge.
See, it's easy.
Just more of an exercise in yeah, just like a fun exercise in unibody and platform sharing engineering, which was pretty new stuff for the time. And you could see 59 GM went to the shared cowl and chassis, and I could do that same splice from a 60 Pontiac Laurentian into a 59 Biscayne or whatever. I could make a 59 Impala hardtop out of a 60 Pontiac sedan. It's the same chassis. It's the same platform, the same cowl, same windshield frame. And when you see, you know, when they started sharing all those components, it became, these kind of splices become feasible. You can't splice a 54 Chevy onto a 54 Oldsmobile. There's just nothing common.
No.
But starting in 59, when GM really had to streamline their design process because Chrysler kind of one-upped them. So GM, in order to get caught up by 59 slash a whole year off the design cycle, they decided that they would share a common cowl, and that makes all of this stuff feasible starting in 59. But you can't put a 57 you know, Oldsmobile on a Chevy Pan or vice versa, but you can starting in 59 or 59.
We kind of joke around. I've got a 1948 Plymouth, but on the back, I've got the Dodge Chrome, because in 48, Dodge needed a low-cost car to compete against Ford. So they basically changed the chrome on a Plymouth. So the back of my Plymouth says Dodge, and I love the reactions I get from people.
Yeah.
Because no one here in the States knows that.
Yeah, we have a lot more. Well, of course, in Canada, because a lot of the smaller towns couldn't support both a Plymouth and Dodge or a Chevy and Pontiac dealer, we got cheap Canadian Pontiacs built on Chevy platforms, and we got cheap Canadian Dodges, which is the one you just saw, which is essentially a Plymouth car with just Dodge fenders and hood. And that goes back to the 1940s here for sure with Plymouth and Dodge.
Yeah, and that's what grabbed me when I first started watching your videos. The fact that you'd be starting the cars up, but the cars you were dealing with were basically Plodges or Mayfairs or whatever they were, and they were basically Plymouth bodies with Dodge or DeSoto front clips, and they had the names on it and all that. That just, to me, there's just not enough shows showing Canadian cars. I'm sorry, I'm just a big, you know, it's on my list of top 10 cars is to get kind of a, I don't know, I haven't quite figured out which one I'm going to get, but you know, the Chevy, the Pontiac GTO on a that looks like half a Malibu or something like that kind of thing.
Beaumont, yes.
Yeah, Beaumonts and that kind of thing. They had one at Bob's Big Boy, I want to say 5 years ago, a 64, but it has the Pontiac dashboard from those years. And it's basically on a Chevy body.
Yeah, and interesting, it does not say Pontiac or Chevrolet anywhere on the car, it's just Beaumont, and it has a little Canadian flag in the thing. And it's funny you mentioned that, because the Canadian cars are fairly ubiquitous around here, and we, you know, it's pretty posh if you have a proper American Dodge around here, because 80% of them were the Canadian Plodge cars. And yet when a lot of the rest of the world, Sweden and Europe and the United States even, will go out of their way to find some of these weirdo Canadian model cars.
Yeah, I've got someone I know has got a Nova, which was an Arcadian, and for some dumb reason, in my estimation, he took off the Canadian parts, which were basically grill and tail lights, and changed them to the Chevy because no one knew what an Arcadian was. And then we've got guys in our Ford club, and I'm bilingual when it comes to cars, that have, one guy's got a 53 Meteor,
right,
which is basically a different grill and taillights on a 53 Ford.
Yeah.
And it's kind of neat to look at them. And then we look at Mercury trucks. We didn't have the Mercury truck in the States. You had it in Canada.
Oh yeah, guys like those tailgates down there just because it's a weird thing. And you mentioned George Barris. If you look at some of the cars he did in the early 50s, some of the shoebox cars, they have Meteor grills in them, which was, it don't have a bullet. It's got kind of a refrigerator style grill in it. And that was, I mean, pretty easy way to look like a custom car when nobody's seen the Meteor, but it just bolts right in.
I mean, it's not like Canada's across the pond or something. You're next door to us. Why did we make things unique like that? And I worked for General Motors and didn't figure it out.
It was just so that in small towns you could support a Mercury dealership but only if it had a low price car to sell. And generally Ford and Mercury dealerships are not in the same building. So they would have Mercury, but then they would take the Ford car and they would make a cheap version of it and they would sell it as a Monarch, which is a Canadian Mercury, which was basically their low-end Ford alternative. And ditto with the Plodges. You could still buy the American Dodges here, but if there was a Dodge dealership in a small town, people would drive to the next town and just buy a Plymouth. So it was all about offering a cheapo version. Ditto with the Canadian Pontiacs, which are essentially Chevy Biscaynes on the same chassis and same. We got bigger 6-banger engines in the Canadian Pontiacs, but it was mostly about allowing a dealership of Mercuries or Pontiacs or Dodge to sell a low-price car. And alternatively, if you had Monarchs, or which one was it? I can't even remember. No, Meteors were sold at the Mercury dealership, and Monarchs, if there was only a Ford dealership, they had an expensive Ford called the Monarch, which was essentially a Mercury with some weird grill in it. And they'd sell that at the Ford dealership. So it was really just about allowing them to have half as many dealerships, but still cover all the same price range. And then starting in 1960, that stuff became prohibitive, really, especially when Dodge started offering their own low-price car. All the Canadian weirdo stuff goes away in 1960 for Chrysler. And then a couple of years later, I think the last Meteors are 64, something like that, somewhere in there. And then after that, I believe you'll find that Mercury offered a low price car anyway with the advent of the mid-size and smaller cars.
Right.
It became, too complex to keep maintaining that many different models. So by the mid-60s, it's all gone. So it's kind of a fun little 10, 12-year period in history where they had these weirdo cars, and a lot of it went to Europe too. Not Dodges, but DeSotos. You see DeSoto Diplomats and stuff, and they're just 4-door Plymouths. So
let's talk a little bit about the show and where you're at now. You're getting pretty much toward the end of the 60 Plymouth. How's that coming along, and when do you expect it to be done?
Well, it would be done already, except that I'm still doing customer stuff. Excuse me. The Plymouth, the worst of it is behind me for sure. It's all painted and going back together, and
looks pretty. I have to say, it looks great. You did an incredible job.
Very
great
happy
paint job.
The thing when you do something like this and you put it out there for everybody to see and criticize with, whether or not they know what they're talking about. I mean, in some ways it made the car better because I was very conscious of, if you do that, you're going to have to hear about it. So
yeah,
I made sure that the standard, and it kind of snowballed on me and it kind of bit me in the ass because the car was supposed to be just like a funny, slightly cooler version of the Fraser, which was going to be like just thrown together. I even considered leaving it all just Frankenstein welded in 4 different colors. I thought that might be really funny. But then I thought trying to pitch that to Haggerty when you want to insure it is going to be difficult because it looks like a demolition derby car. So, and since 95% of the work was the sheet metal, I went from welding to finished paint in 3 weeks. So that extra 3 weeks doubled the value of the car, and that's why it's painted. And yeah, it had to be, I wanted it to be good too, because I got to stand beside it when somebody says who did the paint. So I wanted it I'm kind of all or nothing. Like the Fraser's just a horrible looking thing, but it doesn't matter to me because I didn't do it. You know what I mean? Like it can be ugly because I didn't put that shitty paint job on. It wasn't my fault. But
So
if it's
you
one that
intend,
it's got to be decent. Yeah.
you intend to keep it, obviously.
Oh yeah. Yeah. No, I would never do that for a customer. Like, no way. Just too much work. And, I would just tell them what I tell everybody, just go buy a good one. Like I did that just for the challenge and for the fun and to save the car. But for me, I did my brother's car. We spliced it the same way.
What do you have?
Oh, he's got a 69 Ford Fairlane that his old high school car that he bought when he bought it from the junkyard when we were kids. And had it sitting around at my place, and I was like, either restore this or scrap it because it's been sitting here for 10 years. So we decided that was the one, and it was like the Fury. There was just nothing left of it. And I said, well, just go buy a 4-door. And he found a really nice low mileage beautifully running 4-door for $900. And we just scalped it and put the top of his car on that, and it turned out beautifully. It looks brand new.
Is the sport back?
Sorry, sir.
Is the sport back?
Oh no, this is it's a hard top. It was
okay.
We wanted the fastback when we were kids, but there was just a 2-door hardtop in the junkyard. Not even a 500. I think it was just a plain Fairlane with a 302 dark blue with a white vinyl top, deluxe hubcaps. A real mom's grocery getter kind of car.
Mm-hmm.
And ended up, just it's your first car. I think he paid $150 for it. But all the years later, you get sentimental about it, and then you say, "Oh, okay, well, let's fix it up." Well, I mean, we looked underneath it, and it had been in an accident, and it was just garbage. Like you would never do a car like that. Car is only sentimental value. It does not have any actual intrinsic value. But nevertheless, it's kind of fun because you go to a show, you see 429 fastback Cobra with all the rally, but there's only one 2-door grandma car with bias ply white walls and hubcaps on it. And the satisfaction I get is that it's better than all the restored muscle car ones. I mean, it really does look brand new.
Do you have Scott? We're talking to Scott Newstead from, of course, the show that we're all watching here nowadays, of course, and Cold War Motors. Scott, what's the next car? I know you're also working on the Citroen. You've been working on that. Do you have another project that you want to take in that direction, or what's the plan?
Well, the next project, the Citroen, is for my friend in Montreal, the DS. I'm an SM for myself that I still probably want to get very close to finish before I tackle any other big jobs. Mm-hmm. The next customer car will be a Rover 3-liter for not really customers, for my sister. She said, I want the most British car ever. And I said, well, there's only one car. It has to be a Rover 3-liter like the Queen had. So we've got that to do for her. And then, I don't know, I have narrowed it down to about a half a dozen of my own that I am going to pick from. And I don't know how I'm going to decide. It's I got the Model T, I got the 41 Plymouth, the 60 Ford 250, the 50 Buick hardtop, the 50, what else? I've got a Hudson pacemaker, 1951, mm-hmm. and another Kaiser, 1951 Kaiser, all of which are fairly easy projects. And then I have 1957, 58, and 61 Plymouth hardtops that I also want to build. And they're of course, those things are all rod boxes. So the big body job the next one will probably be 57 Plymouth hardtop car I've always wanted. I want to have 57 through 61 Plymouth, all 2-door hardtops.
Wow. All the big wing cars.
Yeah, I love that stuff. Oh, that was the first cars I was really like, just could not stop staring at, just always loved. And 59 GM cars,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I would love a 59 Buick flat top. If I could get my hands on an Electra 225 4-door flat top, I'd be very happy.
Isn't that the panoramic window on the back?
Yeah. I love
big, wrap around.
Yeah, the flat tops. Yeah, really cool. 59 Buick would be, or a 59. I have a 59 Biscayne, but it's not really viable. I would put together a nice 59 Chevy any day, or 59 Buick. Those are probably my favorite General Motors cars.
Very
Just
good.
how outrageous they are.
Yes.
That's very good. So when you are done with the Plymouth, are you going to like put it in the garage? Or are you going to keep it outside? The
Oh,
60,
it'll be inside. Yeah, that one will stay dry. Yeah,
you're going to have to build some more garages.
Can sit out in the rain, but I'm building more garage right now. Yeah.
Are you?
Yeah. I've got another. Well, it'll hold another 4 or 5 cars at a time. Yeah.
How many cars do you currently have?
Ooh.
Huh? As of today.
I don't. I'd have to count, but I think it's just north of 60. I think, give or take, might be. If it's less than 60, that's good. I'm trying to get it down to 50 and keep it there. The trouble is if you're going to restore one, you always end up buying parts cars, and I don't get rid of the parts cars until the one I was building has plates on it. So a few of them will go. I got a couple I can get rid of once the 60 is finished. I've got, but I have 7 57 Plymouth hardtops right now, and
Wow.
this type of, I've got 11 Citroens, but only 2 with plates on them. The rest of them are projects or parts cars or whatever. It's one of those things if people know that you buy them, they start showing up on their own. And the stuff that I put on my little lot is just whatever, it's supposed to look like an abandoned used car lot from 1965. So if I find something that really would work, like something that I think would really suit the place, like that 57 Dodge 4-door sedan, I didn't really need it, but when you clean them up and you put nice tires on them and you park them, it looks cool.
See, when you have places to put the cars, you can probably get away with that stuff. Yeah.
Well, and I didn't buy an acreage because I like mowing lawn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I looked at that 57 as you were taking it. Well, as you went to look at it and took it off the trailer, and it does look pretty good. It still looks like it has the original interior on it. Most of the trim is still there, which is cool. Other than the top of the front fenders and the sills, the rust really isn't all that bad on that car. That could be an interesting machine.
Yeah, it could. I mean, anything could be saved. It is pretty poor. Like, there's no rockers, there's no floor, and typical quarter panel rot. But it always comes down to the same thing. It's the same amount of work to fix a 2-door hardtop.
Yeah.
And so one's worth 10 grand when you're done, one's worth 35, and it's more, especially with 57, 8, 9, the 4-doors had a completely different roof line. They were a completely different car. And whereas a 59 Chevy 4-door sedan actually looks pretty good, and a 59 Chevy 4-door flat top looks pretty cool. But because they use the same windshield height and stuff as the 2-doors, but the 4-door Plymouths, if I've got 10 of them, they're not really that rare. And so despite how complete it is, nice solid ones are only a few $1,000s, and drivable ones are only 10 to 12. So when we're talking about doing $40,000 worth of body work on one, the car, I mean, if my dream was to have that car, I would do it. But in the end, particularly in the case of those, and I'm not a 4-door hater, I have lots of 4-door cars. But in the case of those, to me, the roof line that's 2-door only, the lower windshield, to me, those cars, there is a hard line on those cars between 4-door parts cars and 2-door hardtops. I'm not even a convertible guy. I've never looked for a convertible. To me, it's the hardtop roof line. 57 Plymouth convertible. It looks like a car with a tent on the top. And so of course, in Canada, convertibles are just like, what the hell would you want one of those for?
Yeah. When I was a kid, my mother had a 57 Plymouth Suburban.
Oh, really? Wagons are fun. Yeah.
Oh, the back seat was reversed, so you could, you could do all sorts of things with the cars behind you, and the mother never knew in the front what I was saying, And we always put up signs, help, she's keeping us, captive and things like that.
Yeah, my grandfather had a 9-passenger Plymouth, like one of the 70s ones, but for sure the same thing. Yeah. I always thought I was always very uncomfortable sitting in the back because people were staring at you.
Yeah. Well, we never thought about rear end collision.
Going to stop,
Yeah, that's it. People tailgate and you get a little nervous.
Yeah. So, but 9-passenger is a fun option for sure. Plymouth Suburban, the wagons. It's nice to see wagons actually achieving a certain amount of desirability, so that they're not all just getting ruined,
right,
or parted out. I think wagons are interesting and should be saved. My friend has a 7 Dodge Sierra, which is a nice car as well. American model, funny enough. And I have no forward look wagons. It just hasn't come my way. They're out there, but I've got my hands full. Like, I really have to pick my battles here. I'm only gonna, I'm not gonna live another 200 years, so I'm also gonna be picking which ones get painted.
Well, if you got so many projects, you can't go. You've got to stay.
Yeah, you've got to pick them, and so I have everything divided into stuff that's actually going to get done and stuff that I'm just buying for fun. And there's a third category of cars that I bought that I'm never going to build, but somebody should, and that's a very small category, and those ones I sell. I think I've sold 3 cars in the last 10 years, and they were all cars that were 2-doors that somebody should build that I was not going to have time to do, and they all went to good homes.
Yeah. Well, when you say you do customer cars, what is your actual business?
Well, it's I'm trying to transition it from just slogging it out, doing scratch and dents, to more or less, if I can make the YouTube channel, break even, then I can get up in the morning. And the goal was, when I started, was if I play my cards right, I can get up in the morning and restore my own cars and have some way of keeping the lights on. Nothing will really change, except that when the cars are done, I get to keep them instead of giving them back to the person who paid for it. So that's the goal. The overall goal was to find some way to restore your own cars and keep the lights on at the same time. Because to me, that's all I've ever wanted to do, is restore cars. But the sad part is you have to give them back when you're done to somebody else. So this way I get to keep them and build my own little collection here. That was kind of the goal, and we're getting there, and the trouble is now that both of the things are full-time jobs right now. So I have 2 full-time jobs, and the dog's a full-time job, and I play in 4 bands, and that's a full-time job.
Oh, gee.
I have full-time jobs. Yeah, well, of course, a little less rehearsal going on with the plague and everything, but still trying to write parts and send them to my friends and stuff. And
okay, plug your band. What kind of bands are you involved in?
Oh, just goofy band, just fun. We got one band with guys I've known for 25 years, and we are doing our second album, which we're still in the writing phase. The first album came out in 1995. So, second album's taking a little while. But we, everybody took a break to have families and careers. Like so many things, it's more fun when you're not doing it for a living. And so, having tried to be musicians as kids, and, like, you get tired of bumming quarters so you can buy a vegetable sub or whatever, like it's just a great way to starve to death. So we went on to, anything is more lucrative, right? So, but we never really, it was never not going to happen again. It just took this long. A couple of the rest of them are just fun bands with friends. I've got one, we play trucker songs. We do all the, the Dave Dudley type of Freightliner Fever type of, you know,
Convoy, you know, that kind of stuff.
yeah, old country and trucking songs, which is fun for me because I had no real exposure to that as a kid. My parents were not truckers, you know what I mean? Like my dad was a bureaucrat, my mom was a nurse, so we didn't really have a lot of exposure to like you know, trucker songs about speed, you know. And so it's been really fun for me to discover that and learn to play with some guys who are really good. I'm just so fortunate to be up there and share my time with them on the stage. And another band was just my friends, just doing all the songs we liked as kids, just old 80s rock songs. And then another band that just helping out a friend playing bass in like a surf type of instrumental band, and then the original recording project band. So keeping busy, and then I write all the music for the YouTube channel as well. So just enough to notice the arthritis, you know, just playing, you know. I was out sanding yesterday and I was like, well, I got to choose. Am I going to sand the inside of this fender or play guitar today? Because I can't do both.
Oh,
and
you're a young guy.
Yeah, well, not.
Okay, how old are you?
I'm let me do the 50. Trying to think if I was 51. Not yet.
You got almost 20 years on you. You're fine.
Yeah. Well, I spent the last 30 on my knees on concrete, and
that's tough.
I can barely sit down now. But you know, I knew that was coming. You know, whatever. If you're a coal miner, you're going to get coal miner lung, and if you're a body man, you're going to get arthritic knees. It's just the way she goes. I'm not complaining about it. It's just a reality, and I haven't really done much to try and treat it. So I'm not, you know, it's not really anything I can complain about. It's just a reality. And
real quick question, and that's not really related, but what's the whole take on what's going on with the virus, the plague, the whole thing in your neck of the woods? I mean, out here, everybody's got to wear masks when they go into stores, and everybody's, you know, social distancing and being in their own space, so to speak. A lot of people are staying at home. What's it like where you are?
Well, I mean, where I specifically am, absolutely nothing has changed because I haven't left my yard 3 times in the last 20 years anyway.
All right, then.
I have everything set up here. My shop is here. My tools are here. My cars are here. My bar is here. All my guitars, everything I do from home anyway. So it has impacted me personally almost not at all. When I do go somewhere, I notice that the roads are pretty empty, which is nice when you're driving old junkers. Yeah, I don't really have an accurate a take on how other people are experiencing it, just because my situation is kind of unique in that I had no job to lose, you know, like I haven't had a job in 20 years. And so I'm also, I mean, I think there's a lot of cognitive dissonance with people a certain amount in shock, a certain amount of not really being able to understand that this is really the end of it. This is her, right? But I mean, I've been reading Dmitry Orlov and Nassim Taleb. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his name right. You know, for a dozen years, and so none of this surprises me. None of it's caught me off guard, and none of it has cost me really anything because I never had any faith in a system that was mathematically unsupportable anyway. Well, that's a pretty cheery little line, isn't it?
What a way to end the show.
Oh, he's super exciting guy, super cheery guy. Yeah, I mean, it's not really fair for me to characterize how other people are experiencing it when really personally here I'm literally as busy or busier than ever. I see a lot of people are probably wishing they had something to do or whatever, but here, I mean, it's for me personally, it's more a matter of supply chain interruptions are probably coming. I won't be able to maybe get some of the weirdo, pardon me, some mail order stuff's probably going to be a problem, but by and large in the city, I don't know, I think everybody's pretty much pretty easy to convince Canadians to stay in the house when it's minus 25.
Mm.
We'll see what happens in the summer. And I don't think it's really, I'm not really the right guy to ask, just because I've very little interaction with the world on a good day.
Yeah.
So, and I've lost nothing because I never invested anything in it. So
Note to self, do not ask coronavirus question as show this coming. Okay. Thank you very much on that. Well, you know, this is the first time we've done our YouTube first. This is going to be our first YouTube show. So I figure, you know, let's have the king of YouTube on the program and get the update on what's going on.
Since he wasn't available, you got
Scott Newstead, Cold War Motors. Thank you so much, man, for staying with us and joining us here on the Talking About.
Thank you guys so much for having me. And,
so again, and Bob, thank you for joining us, obviously. Don't forget.
It was very nice to meet you, sir.
Nice meeting you, and I've enjoyed it. You know, I love the Canadian cars, the ones we're talking about, because they are different, but they're the same. But they're just unique enough that nobody here knows what they are.
Well, you know, Bob, you realize once we decide to get one, we know who to talk to.
Oh,
That's true. Yeah.
You guys are ever up in Canada and want to come and have a laugh at some Canadian junkers,
we might
road trip.
All right.
In my previous life, I covered Canada for my job.
Oh yeah.
I was the marketing manager for the truck division of General Motors.
No kidding.
And I handled all of the USA and Canada, so I was up there about 6 weeks a year.
Wow, that's a huge thing. Like General Motors trucks, in certainly where I am in Western Canada. I mean, there are almost no cars here. I think people come here from other parts of the world and they're like, doesn't anybody have a car? Like, we're certainly where I live, like, you're driving around in a car, it's like, where's your truck, you know?
Yeah.
And then I was on the medium, the commercial trucks, the medium duty, the cab overs and the top kicks and the Kodiaks. Before the reorganization, they decided we don't need those anymore. So
did they stop putting those together?
Yeah, in 2010.
Top kicks and stuff. Oh, really?
Yeah, they've got now. They've merged kind of back with Isuzu, and they're selling the cab overs still, but they got rid of the top kick and the Kodiak.
Flat nose,
right?
General Motors truck. Okay, yeah. Oh, you see that stuff. Yeah, there's still. Well, of course, I wouldn't have known they quit making them because they're still everywhere. Certainly around here, where I live out in the country, we have a lot of people haul their water too. So.
Okay.
A certain genre of vehicle here that we call the Ardrossan water truck, which is like any old piece of shit that you think will make it 2 miles down the road to fill up with water. So it's a pretty, there's some pretty fun one stuff right from the 40s and 50s, like anything that you can put a bucket in the back and fill it with water. They seem to kind of look the other way when they drive by, you know, I'm not, just get home, don't make me see that thing.
It's still running. It hasn't fallen apart.
Mufflers on them. Yeah, no, it's pretty. Yeah, it's still fairly rural where I am, but you know, I'm also have the advantage. I'm only half an hour from downtown if I want to be in the city, but just far enough out of town that I can kind of keep my head down and you know, just stay out of people's way. That's kind of my goal.
Okay. Good. Well, I know you've got to go here in a second, so let me read this part, otherwise known as thanks for listening. Please, please share our show if you're listening to us on radio.com. Subscribe, and it's absolutely free to do that. Leave a comment. If you're on iTunes, rate us, obviously 5 stars if you even need to ask, and review us. Thanks in advance for helping the podcast grow. Our website is talkingaboutcars.net. We are on YouTube now. And that is, of course, Two Tired Guys Productions. Who knows? It might be the Two Tired Guys Network by the time this comes on. Take that off, Bob. It's not totally there.
I know. Well, neither am I, so it works out good.
Oh, you guys are doing the green screen. Yeah, I was going to do that setup. That's fun.
We haven't got the green screen. That's the problem.
Bob is
my office.
You see there's a phone or something on one side.
Follow us on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. We're all over the place. And remember, check out Bob because he has an 11 o'clock in the morning Pacific time show on Facebook called
The Great American Odyssey. You get gas every morning with me.
That's it. And that's why I keep my distance. Until next time, that's Bob, that's Scott, I'm Randy. Thanks for joining us as we had some fun talking about cars. We will see you next time. So long.
Thank you
Take
very
care,
much,
everybody.
guys.
Thank you.